How to embody your spiritual awakening. That's today's topic. And we have to start very quickly with my metaphor of water and ice and water vapor. And all of you have heard this before. You can sit back and relax because you already know where this is going. When we talk about awakening consciousness, we already are it. And so this is why I get into the water, where water has many forms. You don't add more water to water. You don't add more H2O molecules to water. It's already that stuff. But if it's in water vapor, if it's in ice, or if it's in its fluid form, it is all those different things too. Right? So that's why I wanted to think in that sort of term, that in your little ice sculpture, your little iceberg that's floating on the great sea of consciousness that's surrounded by the universal water vapor of, of everything, right? You are separate in that way, but you are still interconnected as part of the whole. You can change shape, you can change form, but you do not become more awakened. You don't embody more water, right? More consciousness. It's already here. It's just in a specific form. And a lot of what this embodying is just coming into a form, a flow, a shape that feels most true to you. It's very, very simple in this way. So I don't want us to think that we're becoming more aware, becoming more conscious. Sometimes I use the aware and consciousness in that dualistic terminology. So you'll have to forgive me, but as I've already said before we started, words only serve so much of a function. If they're pointers, they're helpers, and they should be understood as pointers and helpers. If they're not helpful and not pointing appropriately, then please don't use them. And it's always important to go back to this highest truth first, that we are all one. We are all that water, and all of us in everything is that consciousness in this computer, in this headset, my glasses, in your feet, in your chair. It's everywhere. It's always here. But obviously, as we've frozen into our identities, we've come into this physical form in this flowing world. We've gotten cut off from different things that before are more easy to flow with. So I often talk about melting inwards, melting into that deeper flow of the sea that's always around us, that certainly seems to have currents that draw us in certain directions. And where we resist is like trying to hold on to our little icy forms. So embodying spiritual awakening, as we come to understand this oneness, that leads us towards action. And that's really what most people mean when they're using that term. It's like, what actions do I take to be better, is often kind of the hidden agenda underneath. And being better usually means being safer, feeling good. Right? These are the different ego agendas that get hidden underneath. And I have to point to them very quickly, because a lot of people are trying to use spiritual awakening terminology as a way to feel safe about themselves, as a way to get new identity. There's a lot of different ego agendas that go into it, and it's being used in an external way to get to some sort of safe way of living. But life is inherently not safe. We will die, and that's just part of the human experience. Right? The iceberg is going to melt and evaporate eventually. It's just what's going to happen anyway. The more important question is, are we flowing in the life that we really want to? And for those of you who have had an awakening where things just start moving on their own, right? This is how I'm very specific when I use that term. You know that there's this kind of inner grinding as you run up against old pain you're holding on, old beliefs you're holding on. And that's kind of like turning on the air conditioning unit to keep this thing frozen solid, to try and hold on to this idea of yourself because you're afraid of what would happen if you let go. That in some respects, that you feel like you're going to be hurt. And so then you'll hear many spiritual teachers say, the true you cannot be hurt. I'll use these terms. And then when I'm doing that, I'm speaking to that higher truth, that the water in you, that consciousness in you, is always going to be here. Whether you're dead or alive, it's going to be here. And I think that can be a little depressing for a lot of people who are trying to hear a story where they're going to be like, okay, physically in this world. I can't say that. I can say that it's very possible to let go and to be more yourself and to feel more ease with yourself. And we feel more ease when we're not trying to be somebody else. And there's a naturalness to acting from something that aligns with you, to flowing with those currents that feel most true to you. This is where I usually switch over my metaphors into the apple tree, where as we let go of the shell, right, that shell of who we think we are that's been protecting us, and we start growing, things start to do themselves in a lot of respects. But at times, we still have to keep tending that garden around us, to work through the different rocks and different obstacles we've really placed towards ourselves. We spend a lot of time thinking that what's stopping us is something external, that it's society. Like, society gets blamed a lot. Whoever society is, I don't know, but it gets blamed an awful lot. It's like it's society's fault. But generally speaking, in the Western world, we're really, really lucky. Like, and I honor that we're in the Western world and we're really, really lucky that we have so many options in the ways that we can behave and live. Other societies, you don't. And I mean, for millennia, you were a subsistence farmer or you died. Or you were one of a very, very small landed gentry, that was living off the subsistence farmers, right? And that wasn't, that long ago. So I think in some respects, a lot of us haven't really fully grappled with what's changed in the world of technology and what our opportunities are. And we're still behaving in the sense that there's this one thing that we can do to survive, and this is the only way we can do it, and we have to do that thing. Some people have broader views of what's possible for themselves. That's absolutely true. But even then, a lot of times people's broader views are still very limited in how they think about what's possible for themselves. And occasionally some people are just completely overwhelmed by the possibilities and don't know what to do with it. And there's a certain level of integration with that too. So coming into that deeper inner flow is all about dealing with our issues. And that's really the big step one for the whole embodying awakening. Too many people also, because of Western mentality, were caught in this let's do things mentality, when we need to go inward first. We need to be clear about who we are. And that's one of my big questions that I like to keep throwing out there. There's two of them. It's like, who are you? And I really want you to sit with that, because there are true answers. People will try to give correct answers like, I am consciousness. It's like, no, you don't believe that. You don't care about that. All right, that's not a truthful answer. It's a correct answer, especially in the spiritual circles. Oh, yes, I am conscious. Yes, we're all consciousness. That's fantastic. But who are you? And then you get somebody who will say, well, this is my name, or you start to use reference points. This is my job. And it's like, no, that's your job and that's your name. One's a set of actions you're taking regularly, and others words, more of those puffs of hot air coming out of your voice. Like Jim Tolles is not who I am. It's a name. Right? And I just really encourage you to play with this in your journals, to really look at this, because it will also force you to look at what you've tried to make yourself into. It will look at what you've become. It attempts to be certain ideas, right? And all those things become more mass on top of this awakened self. And it's not, as I said, it's not that you're separate exactly, right? It's all interconnected. And this is the paradoxical nature of living in this world, that we're separate and we're one. And that's why I'm using the water metaphor, because it's still all water, but it's still separate. And both are true. But there are certain levels of separateness that we've created within ourselves that don't feel good. Some of the separateness is around like trauma or wounding from childhood and things like that, because we couldn't process the intensity of some emotion at the time. And it's all varying levels of intensity. Doesn't make anyone good or bad. It's just what happens, because we were just overloaded with stimuli and information. We had no way to really consciously process it. We shut it down. We held on to it. And so all that stuff gets stuck inside. And we hold on to that pain. And we try to protect that pain because we don't want to feel it again. And so dropping into those deeper levels of trauma and pain is about finding all the defense mechanisms as you start to work your way down into the core pain. And if it's a physical pain, something that happened to the physical body, it has to come out of the body, because the body remembers and has to grieve in its own way. And that hurts. It physically hurts. People have had physical trauma go through sections where they just hurt. It happens in my sessions where the body is releasing it from like the muscle, and maybe sometimes it's described as from the bones, where it's coming out. But when that energy comes out, the body comes back to rest. So it's a very simple metaphor where it's tension and rest, where the body is still traumatized and upset, and we're so good at numbing ourselves and overstimulating ourselves that we don't even realize how much pain we're in. And so embodying awakening is embracing all things, and that includes all of your pain. So in a very simple way, embodying awakening means embrace everything about you. The more you do that, the more you're going to find out more about yourself. You're going to find the hidden things, and then you have to embrace them too. And if at any point you get to where you're like, no, I can't do that, now you're finding a new wall. And you have to embrace that wall too. It's like, here is this wall of self-doubt, this wall of disbelief, this wall that says I will be overwhelmed by my own emotional experience. And let's be clear, there are amazingly difficult emotions and stuff that comes out of this human body. There absolutely are. It's incredible how uncomfortable this human being can be, right? This living in this body. And I really want to emphasize that. Like, it's okay to be scared of your emotions, but it's not okay to avoid them. And when I say not okay, what I mean is it's going to perpetuate suffering for you. Anytime I start saying something's not okay or it's bad or evil, what I'm really saying is it perpetuates suffering. Usually when I'm saying good, I mean it's alleviating suffering, it's engendering kindness and joy and those types of things. And a lot of times the things that alleviate suffering is going into pain. So this is where you can get some interesting reversals where feeling worse and feeling terrible and having all these different things come up is actually alleviating suffering. You're feeling pain, but you're alleviating suffering. This is a big reason why I make a distinction when I say pain and suffering. When I'm talking about pain, I'm talking about something that just happens in human life. It's going to keep happening. It's not going to stop happening. If we get sick with a cold, we're feeling certain levels of discomfort and pain. If we stub our toes, we feel pain. Suffering is getting mad that we stubbed our toes. Suffering is avoiding like a broken leg and not fixing that. It's avoiding a difficult emotional conversation we need to have with our partner or spouse, with our kids, right? That creates suffering. Generally speaking, where most of you are, you have to continue to look at your beliefs that continue suffering. Any place where you're caught into believing that you have to be a certain way, or you have to hide something, or you have to fight off something, or if you run from something, any way that you're trying to make life behave differently than it is, any way you're trying to make yourself behave differently than you are, you're creating suffering for yourself. But in creating suffering for ourselves, those become more keys to embodying awakening, because we can start to look at who is this that believes I should act this way or behave this way, or what am I doing? What am I trying to protect? Protection is a big thing of what the ego is trying to do. It's trying to keep you safe. Most unconscious egos, what I mean by conscious, it doesn't realize it's an ego. It doesn't realize it's made up. It doesn't realize it's just a host of beliefs, genetic responses, and social conditioning that's all been lumped together into the idea of you. So it doesn't realize what it's doing, but it's trying to protect you. It's trying to do its best, right? And most of the time it's failing pretty miserably. And we know it fails because of how easily it can be triggered by difficult situations. The more at peace we are when we're with difficult situations, that really shows that you've succeeded on a lot of respects. Anytime you go into that auto response of an ego where it's just getting scared about something or getting upset, or it's causing you to act a certain way without really thinking about it in a conscious way, it's failing. Spiritual path in many respects is about choice. When we're unconscious to the beliefs that we have, we don't make choices. We think we do, but a lot of times our choice has been narrowed to one option or to very few. It's like the ego comes and says, this is what's safe, it's in this box, and it can be completely wrong. Especially in cases where people have had trauma, what happens is everything gets flipped. So what I mean by that is the things that would actually be nourishing and supporting get labeled as a threat. The things that are actually going to hurt somebody get labeled as safe. And so they get put inside this little box. And this is all that the choices you can make. And this is why people can go through cycles of different kinds of physical, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, like anything you can think of that causes harm to somebody else, that we can recycle it, because this is what the person knows, this is what the ego has experienced. So by the fact that you're still alive, the ego assumes that whatever you experience for the most part is what you should continue to experience, especially from childhood. So that's the tyranny of our ignorance. It just knows what it knows. And stepping outside of our comfort zone is a big part of everybody's healing, because the more open you are to life, the more of a perspective you have, the more choice you can make. So a lot of the embodying awakening for most of you is still going to be in your mind. It's still working with a lot of beliefs about who you think you are. And the other big question is, what do you want? And the two are intertwined, because when we think, oh, I am a major sports athlete, right? So what do you want? I want to win trophies, right? It starts to follow certain different things. So, and I want, different working out regimens and, different coaches to help me get to my goal. And, right, it starts to dictate everything around it. Right? When we link our identity to being a businessman or a businesswoman, right? It's like, well, I want to make lots of money, or I want to have lots of success, or, we're starting to get some more altruistic ideas out there. It's like, I want to make a difference through my business. This is happening. It's a good thing. It's really exciting. I think there's some movie coming about something with like the word billion in the title, where this guy, he has his own products that he's gotten really successful with, but now he's like kind of created an engineering incubator to create different solutions to help world problems like water. Water is a big deal. People don't realize how big of a deal water is. It's not just because I'm in California in the middle of a drought, and I've lived out in the West where for most of my life where there's just huge water issues. As you get more and more people, clean drinking water, water to clean ourselves and all that stuff is going to become a bigger issue. And I'm just going to put a little plug for that, because that's an issue that's going to be worldwide and we all have to know about and deal with one way or the other. And so this particular story is somebody who's trying to make a difference to a business in that way. So once again, what happens is the more we kind of tune into like what matters to us, it dictates the things we want and things we do out in the rest of our world. So returning to ourselves first is still important, and continuing to return. And the Western mentality is such a let's do it now mentality that we think embodying awakening is about a set of actions that we're going to go do. It's like do like 90 mantras in the morning. Like for some people, I could say that and they will go do that. But that doesn't make you more awake. That's just an action you take. If that's your bliss to do 90 mantras in the morning, then fine, go do that. And generally speaking, you don't speak of awake in that term. To me, it's a gradual process of becoming more conscious and more aware. And I know I've used flopping my terms around a little bit, but just bear with me. So moving from unconscious where we don't know to being conscious where we know some of the things we know, which is generally speaking us, and we also know the things we don't know. So consciousness really is turning the light in the room on. When that light's on, then you can see a lot of different things. You have depth perception, you can see what's in the middle, and you can also see where the walls are. You start to get a sense of where your current limitations are, and you can start to deal with them until you turn that light on. In this regard, I'm just saying, just being honest about how you think about life and what you want and who you think you are. Those are defining the walls in your room, which are also illusions. If we go too early to try and take action, we continue to operate from this small room. We're just trying to interact with what fits with our self-concept without really investigating it, because really investigating is going to scare the crap out of you. And we want to scare the crap out of you. When you are crapless, then you're going to be so much freer. But in so doing and challenging these different things like who are you, and if you're no longer a businessman or a businesswoman, and that's been your core identity, it starts to get very vulnerable very quickly. It starts to unmask any hidden pains inside you that you have to process. And I've been making this distinction a lot this week, I think, between processing emotion and creating it. Creating new emotions comes from poor understanding of life, from our beliefs and things like that. So somebody breaks up with you, you're in a romantic partnership, you're married, and you're getting a divorce now. The mind has a belief that this is bad. It interprets it so you should be sad. For a lot of people, not everybody, right? There are amicable breakups and things like that that happen. But I'm just pointing to a set of beliefs that happen invisibly that make you think, this is the only way to respond to that, right? So that's creating sadness that doesn't actually exist. You can be completely at peace with somebody coming into your life and coming out of your life. It's okay if you're upset, right? But as part of deepening into your own awareness, it's important to breathe in and relax and to notice the beliefs you have around it and to notice the reality of your current life. Because a lot of times when two people part, it's actually a good thing. Not all relationships are meant to last for your whole life. So the other thing, and this is especially why we meditate when we relax into spaces, is when we start to feel sadness come up. And a lot of my students feel it very physically. I know that I do, where suddenly you feel like this knot in your chest, right? You start to breathe into it. The current moment, there's no reason to be sad. And you can do this later when you are being triggered and stuff like that, but it's more difficult. So it's usually helpful to start at first, like, oh, here's this knot of sadness, right? Here's this little mini iceberg in this greater size iceberg, and it's trying to come back into the flow, back to the water metaphor. So you're breathing, you're allowing the sadness to come up and talk to you. And sometimes a memory will come out of it. Sometimes it won't. It'll just be sadness. And you just keep breathing, making space to witness as well as experience. To me, that's duality and oneness together. The witness is that oneness, right? That kind of almost a stepping back. But when you're really doing it, you're not separate from your experience. You're not cutting off. You're not separating. You're just dropping into a deeper space of that ocean that still embraces the iceberg. And from that awareness, that warmth of that space, and it's not a cold, neutral, dry space. It's a very warm space the more you drop into it. It starts to melt that sadness. The sadness washes up. Maybe you cry a little, and then it's gone. This is what I call processing emotion. So two main terms, processing, wallowing. Wallowing, you have a belief. Oh no, someone's leaving me, blah, 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 right? I got fired, I'm sad, right, blah, blah, blah. Or I'm angry, whatever. So you go into this riptide, continuing the water metaphor. You're going to get tired of water metaphors, but at least you have a sense of what they are. Make up your own if you don't like them. So the riptide will just drown you. You'll just get lost and you're regenerating sadness. You're not processing anything. You're just going, oh, it's so bad. Ah, da, da. And we can do that when we start to process something here. So say a memory comes out of being fired and it was upsetting. If the mind comes in and starts to say, oh, this was bad, or I should be still upset about it, right? Then you start to wallow in the issue as opposed to allowing it to release and allowing yourself to come back to rest. Now, when you really release something, some of you have had these experiences, and what you'll notice is there's a sense of lightness, of relaxation. You can be kind of tired after working through something, but all other times you'll be very energized. It's like, wow, because that energy that it was stuck is now free and is now able to move and flow as water in a more easily accessible form. And so that's what I really mean by embodying awakenings. You're coming into that natural ability for all human beings to flow and adapt and change to different situations, to see things clearly, and to make choices. And to make choices from a new level of openness and clarity. And each time you do that, you start to realize where your next level of walls are. But just in understanding that now that there are more walls, you can address them. And you can also not hold on to decisions. You can understand that certain decisions are going to evolve and change in your life as you continue to grow and to learn more. It's not a means of waiting until you have a perfect understanding before doing anything. That's not how it works for us, right? We're all a progress in this human form. It's just how it is, a work in process, really. But having the humility to know that I don't have to hold on to a point of view, and also having the inner dedication to keep learning about yourself and to make decisions based on the best things that you know in that moment. That's part of the dance of being a human being, and it's part of embodying awakening. And so we take a few steps after we've released these things, we've opened up our spaces, it becomes more clear how we want to live life, what manifesting love, what those actions look like for us. And we can go from there and we can take the next step, not get to a goal, but just the next step, whatever it is for you. I think this is a good time to open it up for questions. So if any of you have some questions that are burning in your heads, this is a great time to chat, or you can keep breathing and relaxing and sitting into what's being shared. As always, there's a deeper energy to these connections, even though it's online. And the deepest learning is beyond words, it's in energy. I know the common thing people want to know is I just want to know what to do. But anytime that comes up, that really is just Western society that's cracking the whip at your heels. In a lot of respects, it's also a means of self-avoidance. We're just trying to stay busy so we don't feel what's inside. And nobody really likes that. So eventually we want to feel good again. So we stay super busy and then we find increasingly intense levels of stimulation. Drugs, alcohol, sex, rock concerts, there's lots of things. Hi, Kavitha. Suddenly everyday life and moments have become easy. It's amazing how easy life becomes when we're easy on ourselves. Especially in, a relatively safe neighborhood in a lot of Western culture where there's nothing really happening that's requiring us to be scared. We're fed, we're housed, no one's trying to kill us, right? And that's not the case for the rest of the world. There are plenty of parts of the world that are very unsafe. Although it's not to say that, some of the people there don't find ways to drop into deeper relaxation than a lot of people in Western culture, because Western culture has just gotten so fear-based, so agitated that even when everything is fine, like I'm assuming right now all of you are in relative safety, you're fed and you're housed and you're clothed, you are all fine. But you may be noticing even now that parts of your ego are like agitated in some way, like I got to understand him better, or I got to do that, or right, that it's creating levels of anxiety and fear that are unnecessary. This is also from Kavitha. Is this ego playing a hide and seek game? Should I keep looking inwards for things to clear? That's up to you. I usually find that my ego issues come find me. I don't seem to need to go anywhere because, I'm here all the time with myself. If something's gone into remission, something will come someday to trigger it, and then you start to process it again. But you can always intensify, right? You can have a session with me. You can go try Kundalini Yoga. You can get into different sexual tantric practices, which are meant to energize the Kundalini as well, just from a different point of view. So there's all sorts of energizing and focusing tools and techniques in the spiritual world if you're ever concerned that you feel complacent or you feel stuck. But I usually feel like the biggest issues are kind of hidden in plain sight, that you just don't really even have to look that hard. Like the doing thing that I'm talking about right now, where people define themselves, they define who they are by what they do. And that's a trap, because we are not what we do. You're welcome, Kavitha. Thanks for the question. Hi, Charu. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Do you have any tips for overcoming those messages that tell us that the safe actions are actually unsafe? How to be with the fear of taking actions that the ego feels are unsafe? Well, that's where I would probably just say, just do it, sort of a thing. If you know in your heart what to do, right, and you have a very strong sense of intuition, that's the first step, right? Is being clear. This is an intuitive message. And that's something that you can meditate on, you can make space for. The thing about intuition is they tend to be consistent. If you're really calm and quiet, they'll be very calm and quiet. They don't actually force you to do things. There can be a quality of urgency to something we really know we need to do that's kind of pushes an intuition. And with some of those urgency, that can trigger fear in different people. We're like, oh, this is scary, right? Because I'm about to do something new. And then fear and intuition get bundled up, and that's a common thing. And it's just part of everybody's practice that you have to get better at peeling these pieces apart for yourself. But intuition is consistent. Fear is not. Fear will keep changing the goal. It'll think it should do this for a while, and then it'll think it should do that and move around as it's trying to address a hidden problem. When that happens, that's something to breathe into. It's like, okay, so what's the message? And check with the emotional content of it. What is that? Is it a lot of fear? Is there hiding some sort of depressiveness to it, a sadness to it? And then dropping deeper, it's like, is this something in my body? It's like, where is this living in my body? Because a lot of our emotions live there. Then if you're clear enough, right? It's human being, we're never super clear all the time. And life is always shifting and changing. And then you just have to take it and find out. And when we talk about safe and unsafe actions, right, that's a big spectrum. So let's be really clear. I'm not talking about walking mindlessly through the Korean DMZ, right? Or going through some gang-ridden place in the United States and just thinking we're going to be fine. And it's what the message tells us to do to prove to ourselves that we are being protected by God. It's like, this stuff happens. People think this way. And so that's why I'm setting this tone. I'm not assuming this is what people in this group are going to do, but I just want you to understand context. When we get into the safe context of just asking out the cute person at the checkout counter that we've been seeing every day when we go to get our coffee, right? That's a different thing where the ego says, this is unsafe, I could be rejected. That's not unsafe, all right? This doesn't even qualify on the safety scale, but this is what the ego tells us. And in that instance, the advice would be, ask him out. Let me know if that helps, Charu. And thank you for the question. Hi, Michelle. She says it's not a calm time for her. Sometimes it is overwhelming when multiple issues make themselves known quite loudly at the same time. Well, at least they're making themselves known and that you can notice them, right? That's a sign of dropping into more awareness, or rather, a sign that we're aligning more with awareness rather than with the frozen iceberg. We're aligning more with the ocean of consciousness, that water that's within us and around us, rather than the identity. But the thawing process isn't necessarily comfortable. I usually encourage people just pick one issue to work on to help bring in that focus, right? So if our focus is too broad, it's difficult to really grapple with a lot of issues, and it doesn't seem to do much good, except for when somebody's in the full-blown awakening, and then you just feel like a pressure cooker, and then that's all you do is you lie on your couch, and it just burns itself out. Even there, it's helpful to focus your attention, to make that broad light into a laser, to start to focus in on one, find out where it's living in the body, what's the emotional content, starting to learn and listen to its stories, but learn and practice listening from a place of deeper peace and neutrality at first. It's a deeper space of love and clarity later as we move through it. It can be very helpful to move through that neutral space where we kind of feel it's not quite a grayness to it, but it's definitely like an unfeeling place. It's not as rich. It's where a lot of people go when most of your life you've been very reactive. So the first step into that space is kind of like getting on dry land a little bit, putting aside water metaphors. Uh, and so that can feel very strange, but as you go, like you just get used to it. It becomes this very warm, connected space where you're disconnected, but still connected to yourself. So you're just not caught up in the story. That's what you're disconnecting to. Let me know if that's helpful, Michelle. What other questions do people have about embodying awakening? Still pretty simple, right? Know thyself. If you don't know yourself, you don't know why you're doing what you're doing. And you won't know if you are moving from a place of truth or clarity and that feels aligned to however you want to live life. Awakening doesn't care how you live life. I mean, that's why we can do the things we do in this world. There are a lot of awful things human beings are doing to each other in this world right now. We have so many actual problems, like the water and having 7 billion people that's a big issue. That's an actual issue. And that's partially caused by there's so many of us. But even so, it's not a made up one, like a conflict between two countries who are just wanting each other's resources, right? That's completely made up. The different arguments we have with different people over how to run a website, that's made up. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't even really exist, right? But all these competing interests and the way that we move our interests and the way we cut off from each other and greed and all these different things, right? We create huge amounts of problems. So a big thing about what we're doing is we're dealing with the problems we've created within ourselves, dealing with the pain inside ourselves. And the more we deal with that, then it's just that much easier to live. And kind of what Kavitha was saying is everything kind of becomes easy. It's not because the external world has gotten easier, it's because we got easier on ourselves. Hi, Charu. Thanks, Jim. It's true what you said about intuition fear. Strong fears, for me, get triggered around standing up for myself and speaking my truth. Sometimes when the fears are really strong, it seems very hard to touch the intuitive space. It's like the fear becomes static and I can't receive the signal. Thanks for the example. I mean, the speaking your truth is you have to speak your truth. You're not doing it in the middle of the Korean DMZ, once again, to make an exaggeration. But if it's, a discussion at work, speaking up is important. A lot of people are like, well, what happens if I get fired? And being fired means you're out of a job, which means you're not making money, which is linking into fears of survival, which is linking to our fear of death. Right? It sounds crazy to link it up like that, but that's ultimately what's going on. It's like, so we're afraid of dying if we speak up in the boardroom. All of you know how ridiculous that is, and I'm saying it this way specifically to make it ridiculous, but we have to look at the puppet master behind that's pulling all of our strings. So the advice, generally speaking, is pretty simple. Speak your truth. The more we learn how to speak our truth, then we can move between speaking our truth and silence. See, this is the choice. Where in this wonderful example, and thank you, Charo, for offering it to us today. In this wonderful example, the box says speaking up is not safe, right? So in this box right here in between my hands, this says speaking up is not safe. That means everything outside the box, right, is where speaking up is. Now, if we open it up, now we can be quiet or we can speak up. And you notice that I do this when I talk to you, that I take time where it feels appropriate to be quiet. The awakened space simply is giving you more choice in how you want to live life. And in that space, you will notice that there's certain ways that do feel true. And some of them are way outside this little box that most of you have been living in your whole lives, just as I had. Let me know if that's helpful, Charo. Hi, John. Thanks for a statement about just laying on the couch and letting it burn out. I wonder when the emotional crap comes up really heavy, it's healing, assuming without thought or wallowing that I'm doing. I guess it's the non-doing in a world of doing that gives me the sense that I should be doing more to change things. Yeah, I mean, that's a big one. And I don't know if it's any bigger or less for men and women now, but in the past, have been very defined by action and gathering resources and doing things, where, just stereotypically, women have been defined by family and relationships and raising kids, right? These have been kind of the two core molds that in the last 50, 60 years in Western society, we've been starting to break out of them. So for men, though, there's still this heavy impetus to keep doing things, to prove ourselves for a variety of reasons. And when we suddenly are just in this kind of allowing space for a lot of people, a lot of us who really absorb that lesson, and once again, this can be women too, like I'm not excluding, I'm just speaking stereotypically to Western society, to be in that space where not doing feels like a failure, can elicit different fears that you're not going to make it, you're not going to survive, you're not okay for some reason. So in that respect, just lying on the couch, John, is working on that set of issues right there. And that's not a small thing. And the more at peace you are with just being in that space, the happier you're going to be. And you're not going to feel like life is driving you to do tons of things as you get off that couch, as you burn off that issue. Thanks for the comments. I always appreciate them. And you're welcome, Charu. So the further you go, the whole embodying awakening doesn't become a question at all. Right? That's very much a Western mentality question to ask. It's like, I need to do something. What do I need to do? Right? The more relaxed you are, at peace you are, you don't care. You're not thinking. I don't think I ever think about embodying awakening for myself. I'm just like happy doing what I'm doing. And sometimes, mainly I'll see that part of the Western mentality in me that's, trying to strive or get somewhere, and I'll just pause like, no, life is actually really, really good. This is fantastic. Hi, Tony. And the question is, when dealing with very deeply embedded pain, there's so much coming up, it can be overwhelming and hard to define the individual issues in the wraps. Absolutely. How to focus in on any particular one or the core one, it's so confusing. Tony, I love you. I know what you're talking about, and I honor you. And I want to start there. I don't want to rush off past that. I mean, the next thing that I have to say is endure, but with that space of relaxing, right? If it's the endurance is holding on, it's just gonna sit there and churn on you, and that's just so miserable. The issue enough is enough, right? And so just do your utmost best. Build your support circle around you. Make that space where you can fall apart and let it work itself out and keep breathing and relaxing. And from time to time, find something really pleasurable and nice and fun to do for yourself to get out of it a little bit. It can be hard because when we really get down into those depths, it's tough to switch the mindset, but get out and get surfing right for a little bit, then come back, and as you relax more, it's going to come up, and that's just going to be the way it goes for a while. This is why I talk about having our spiritual practice when things get really dark. And I know you're reaching out and getting some additional support, and that's good. Those are all really needed pieces, and that's something I want to emphasize for everybody. There are certain issues where we all need a little help. It's like, and I know I mentioned this to one of you in an email not too long ago. On the spiritual path, nobody can walk this path for you. And that really emphasizes that this is your choice. You can go into this stuff or not. When I say walk the spiritual path, it really means that path of getting to know ourselves, working through issues, and that sort of thing. Because awakening embraces everything. It embraces dictators and embraces saints. That's just how it is. It's never not accepted all of humanity as we are. And it will continue to accept all of us. And it's up to us to decide what sort of world we want to live in. So that first part, no one can walk the spiritual path for you. This is up to you. But the second part is, but you can't do it alone. Because that's also the truth of awakening, that we are all one. We're all in this together. We're all interconnected. And we all need a little help in our humanity from time to time. So thanks for sharing, Tony. I appreciate it. Hi, John. Not a small thing you say of feeling this stuff. I sure hope it's no small thing. Can't imagine what a big thing would be if it were. And Tony says, thanks so much and you're welcome. Lots of love to you, dear friend. Well, John, I would just say, in reference to big things, just have compassion. I think, as a spiritual teacher, the more I work with people around the world with all the different things that have happened and gone on, I just keep having more compassion. It's like I definitely have a sense that there are some really big things I've never had to experience, like war trauma, okay? Having part of my body shot off or seeing somebody else's body shot off or killing somebody, right? These types of things, even if you are the victor, right, and you're killing somebody, you join with that other person's energy. It's a deeply intimate violence, even though guns have made a lot of these things very impersonal, which is causing additional problems because Of course, it makes it easier for people to do more violence when things are less personal. But even then, you're still connected. All right, so this is the truth that we're all one, and what I do to somebody else, I do to myself. I've never had to deal with the healing process around that. So I'm just pointing to it as a big thing since you brought it up, John, and I'm just pointing to it as why all of us continue to need to practice compassion, because there's so many different things and everybody gets stuck with certain pains. Now, compassion isn't leniency. It's not saying that people who have these pains shouldn't get help. It's just simply compassion to understand that there's some really awful things, really awful emotions and feelings, like I mentioned earlier in this webinar, of stuff that erupts inside that many of you can't even imagine what it was like. So it doesn't diminish what you go through, all right? I'm not diminishing any of that. I'm simply offering some other way where we can bring compassion into our lives to appreciate. And compassion is one of those things that I find tends to grow up out of awakening. It tends to be kind of that embodied, one of the embodied qualities of awakening. It just seems to happen on its own. And that to me is really where we take this conversation with embodied awakening. It's the type of thing probably should do the next webinar about, this whole being in our natural growth and rhythms and what that's like, because there's a certain quality of ease that starts to arise on its own, and certain things grow up out of this space. And there are things like compassion and kindness and generosity, right? Those things just seem to happen. You don't really have to force them. Initially, we are kind of overcoming our own ego programming of reaching out and whatnot for a lot of people. Or a lot of people have done this from an impure place where they're trying to get people to validate them by proving that they're nice people. That happens a lot. This is different. This is just what grows up in in your heart, what you have to offer to others, and that compassion that you can offer to yourself as well. And these are other aspects of self-love. And self-love is simply total acceptance of who you are. Light, dark, gray, in between, up, down, sideways, backways, fat, thin, tall, short, everything. That's what self-love is. It just says, I am as I am. And I accept that. We still have time for a couple more questions. So I'm going to share my screen. These webinars are free as always, but webinar or donations for the webinar and general donations whenever you feel moved to give are really, really helpful, because that's what this work runs on. This has been a phenomenal year because of many of you, for sessions and general donations and webinar donations and all that stuff. This is my only work now. So that's a big thing. This is my 5th full year that I've just come across in October. October is kind of my anniversary work year of when I claimed doing the spiritual teaching. I think in truth, I've been doing it for some time in a variety of ways. Growing up, I just didn't realize it. But to help me keep going, I do need financial support through donations, which a lot of you already know and do, which is fantastic. And so if you're new, the donate to the blog button is here. I'll probably do a little bit of a fundraising push, because since March, I've been financially breaking even. That includes taxes. So it's not just like the base cost of living. So that's exciting. But I will do a push because I'm going to be short for the year overall, unless I get about $5,000 to $6,000 more. So even $10 or $20 or something thrown into the hat, because more and more people give, it makes a big difference, and you can do so here. But please don't feel that you need to. I really try to encourage people through suggested donations and all these things that I do to practice giving from the heart and not from obligation. A lot of people confuse, the $150 suggested donation I do for my one-on-one sessions as a rate, and to me, it's not. I accept $10 for some of my sessions as well as $150, and people could actually give more if they wanted. But the point is, that's another place where I'm trying to help people break down these old mindsets of I have to give to get, right? I'm just trying to make that space at the same time while supporting myself. So thanks to all of you who have really, made this thing happen, because many of you who have donated in the past, and I'm sure we'll donate again in the future for different sessions and things like that. You're why I'm here, and I really appreciate it. Question from Simone. My biggest obstacle to any connection to myself, however small to myself, has been the super ego. It's amazing how powerful it can be. What do you mean by superego? Thanks, Michelle and John. Thanks, Indigo. Oh, inner critic. You're welcome, Kavitha. Well, I think he's gonna have to start not worrying about it so much. It's like just let it keep talking, like a little kid chatting in the background, and just do whatever you really want to do anyway. I think we can start to create some of these illusions that we're disconnected from ourselves when we're not. Right? That's part of the water metaphor. So like, the inner critic is still a part of the little ice cube floating along, but it's still water. And you can bring more attention to that inner flow that you have within yourself, Simone, or you can bring more attention to the inner critic. And when you do bring your attention to the inner critic, things are going to feel worse and more impossible. When you bring your attention back out to the that deeper space, it's not going to seem so much of a problem. And as always, I like to remind people, focus on your reality, because a lot of times what the inner critic is talking about, there's no actual real threat to be upset about. And the real things in life, water, air, food, shelter, being warm and clothed, right? And if that's taking care of you in this moment right now, then you are okay. You're welcome, Simone. Any last questions? We have time for one more. Hi, Indigo. I'd love if you can expand on the topic really quick of give and get. How do you mean? Because I mean the ego's in an acquire mode. That's really what I'm referring to, right? So the resource require or acquire, I'm sorry, acquire mode. So like gather as much stuff to it to make itself safe, right? It's kind of a hoarding mentality, kind of like squirrels. But squirrels do it to have enough food to survive. We go beyond that with the hoarding. And so that's one of the things that creates levels of scarcity. Another is simply the perception that we don't have enough when we often do. And that's what I was pointing to with the are you fed? Are you clothed? Are you housed? Right? Because a lot of times we're so busy thinking we don't have enough when we can't even see the truth that we actually do. And that makes us hold back on sharing as well. And so when we're all holding on, we're not sharing, and money ultimately is just energy. It's just energy that moves back and forth and around the world. And if we focus money into things, we build bridges, right? It's a way to collect our consciousness and our energy into one thing. We build these amazing bridges. So a lot of people, yeah, they do have that you have to give to get mentality, but the more you dissolve that ego self within you, you start to realize that everything you truly want is already here. And that radically changes how you look at money. If you're still trying to get things and to prove things to yourself and to make yourself into somebody, now you're going to live in that mentality. And there's the fear of failure, because failure is very possible. In some respects, failure is going to be your greatest gift in that mentality. So as a consequence, people don't know how to use money on a lot of regards. They don't know how to support things that they care about, and they support things they ultimately don't care about. I use this with the oil industry. It's like people say, "Oh, the oil industry is bad." It's like, guess what? They are getting billions of dollars from all of us, which is essentially saying we support them. So it's just one last thing to think about with money. It's a little bit different, but it is part of, as we embody awakening, it becomes clear where do we want to move our energy. And our energy is our action, is our money, is our emotion, is our words. Like all those types of things are just energy. And you do become more mindful. It's like, is this a mindful way of moving my energy? Is having cable TV a mindful way to move energy? Is speaking badly about my boss a mindful way to move energy, right? It's actually the same. So these are my thoughts about embodying awakening. I hope they're useful to you, and thank you all for joining. The next webinar will be at 6 o'clock, and look forward to having some of you there again.